Hello, this is March 29th, almost April, for our CI/CD UX meeting. And we don't have any standing topics to review right now. Is anything blocked or at risk for anyone? No. Okay. All right, then I'll just leave it to Emily.
So to give some background on this, I think a bunch of you know I am now working with the configure team and release we've come together into the environments team. And with part of my onboarding was understanding what Kubernetes was, which is a word I've heard quite a bit. But during my onboarding, I was reading about it and nothing was sticking until one person told me about Kubernetes as a post office. And I just wanted to go through that because I chatted with Gina about this and we were both like, oh, everything makes so much more sense now. So I just put together a very, very tiny little presentation that kind of goes over what I learned during this onboarding. So going back to it, I did a lot of reading about Kubernetes. A lot of it was in very technical jargon and nothing was sticking until I came across the post office metaphor where it kind of subbed in Kubernetes as like a post office management. And everything here then started to make sense with me. So this is just like a cute little story about that. So a post office, as we all know, is responsible for processing and delivering thousands of packages each day, and the goal being that the packages are delivered to the intended recipients quickly, securely, and reliably. Kubernetes kind of does something very similar to that. To help achieve this, there's a team of postal workers responsible for processing and delivering packages. However, with packages, there's many challenges, such as sometimes there's an influx of packages coming in, there's incorrect addresses that need to be fixed, and this is where the orchestration portion comes into play. So when you think about Kubernetes in the same frame as a post office, you can think about containers, which is a package of code, as like the mail packages. And when you get a group of containers together into pods, you can think of this as just a group of mail packages that need to be delivered to the same place. So you have now that group of mail packages needing to get somewhere. And then there was no emoji for a postal worker, so just pretend he is a postal worker. Kubernetes makes sure each group of packages, known as the pod, is assigned to a postal worker, known as a node, and that all these groups of packages are evenly distributed across workers, so we're not overwhelming certain workers or certain workers aren't getting any work. It also makes sure workers have the resources necessary to handle each pod, such as enough room in their delivery truck, which is the CPU or memory. And then Kubernetes also makes sure that each worker is not overwhelmed by packages by doing the load balancing or adjusts the number of workers based on how many packages are coming in, which is the automatic scaling. And if a worker calls in sick or a node becomes unavailable, Kubernetes can help get the new worker on the job so the delivery goes uninterrupted. So yeah, you can think of Kubernetes as an operating system that manages the processing and delivery of packages in a post office by ensuring they're all assigned to a worker and that the resources are allocated efficiently so workers can do their job. So this is just a very, very tiny story I put together, but when doing my onboarding, this is the one thing that helped me really, really understand what Kubernetes was. And I thought it was cool to share out that with everyone else.
That was so great. I love that. And it makes it like so much more obvious, I think, as to what Kubernetes means. And I have one question for you.
Yes.
Which is, do we the information that you were saying, like CPU and memory that is there, and if a node goes down and stuff, do we get that visibility into GitLab, or do you only get that when you're using whatever Kubernetes platform you're using?
Very good. I might lean on Ellie here because I'm still learning some of the stuff that we're actually showing in GitLab. But is that kind of the work that we're doing around the Kubernetes dashboard currently to get more of that information showing into the UI?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do with the dashboard.
Okay, sweet. Were you I've had to deal with Kubernetes a lot lately with runners as well, because runners are sometimes, in the way that you're saying that there's a coordinator, it like the runner acts as that, and he's like the head, and then tells whatever machines to go work within the cluster. But a lot of people have brought up the fact that CPU or memory could be an issue, and that's why like the runners aren't working as expected. So I think we're going to start exploring that probably within like the next couple of years, and there's going to be a lot more connection between the runners and Kubernetes in general.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, Emily, like I love the presentation. It's super simple with like the emoji theme. I love it. And then what I would feel like, honest feeling, I needed this like 3 years ago when I started to work on the distribution team. With a lot of tears, with a lot of time watching the YouTube developers talking about Kubernetes, wasn't easy. Ali is laughing because he knows. I know that Ali was reading a book about Kubernetes, so this is what I needed. So thank you for that. And I also really like the point that Gina just mentioned, that this concept could be work like load balancing, and then it's kind of make things more scalable. And then I think it could be also applied to runner and many other places. And I think that's the reason why Kubernetes is getting more popular. So 2 thumbs up for your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, something super simple I wanted to put together. But when I was talking with Gina during our one-on-one, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. So I think it'll be helpful to share it to everyone. Erika, I think you're next.
And yes, thank you, Emily. I wanted to share like the origin story, which I don't know if you know this, but this really helped me in as much as I understand Kubernetes, which I don't think anyone ever will. So there's that. But so it started, this is like an Erika version, so factual, we're going with this story, origin story. Okay, so Pokemon Go was this big app, right, where everyone was trying to catch them all. And it was this huge craze. And it was a Google startup that was in charge of it and spinning it up. So what happened was they didn't anticipate that so many people would be using it so quickly. And within the first 3 days, everything crashed because they couldn't serve those users. And then they were like, well, how could we scale things more quickly without having a big overhead and cost? And then they bore Kubernetes, which is this idea that you don't have to have all that compute power all over the whole country, but when you need it, you scale it up immediately in this localized way. And I didn't really understand it. And then I had that like I remember when that went down. But that was like the computing problem that then kind of led to the creation of Kubernetes. And then just one more note that I've heard it also. I think the male person perspective is perfect because it's like more relatable to, like, I can think of a male person, like a male man or a male woman person. But also like this idea of shipping containers is another metaphor you'll see a lot. But yeah, I don't relate to a shipping container person as much as a male person. Okay, cool. Anyway.
Yeah, Erika is the person of analogies. I remember when you told me about the Hummer and the scooter stuff about secrets management, I was like, wow, it just made everything seem so simple. It was a great presentation. Thanks, Emily. And it actually like, it kind of explained in such a simple way the whole, like the environment, when I talk about everything related to Kubernetes, like load balancers, workers, I mean, what's the individual role? I have went through some pretty complex comic books in the past, but they did not do this job. So yeah.
Well, I took the inspiration from one of the uh courses I did. Actually, it might have been the documentary Will just mentioned, but someone said this, and then that was really my light bulb moment. So all the thanks has to go to I believe it actually was the documentary. I might have linked the wrong thing in my slides, but this documentary Will kind of linked here was great in helping me understand Kubernetes.
Yeah, and the documentary like briefly touched on what you covered in your slides, like maybe the first 2 or 3 slides. It didn't go like very deep with that metaphor. So it was nice to like have a better understanding of it. And then it also, I think maybe it's like a 2-part documentary because the whole thing's posted to YouTube. I think there was a section of it that also touched on what Erika mentioned with like Pokemon Go as kind of that example.
I do remember Pokemon Go crashing on me though, so I remember being part of that.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah. I wish I came across the story when I was still working in Configure, but yeah, I think in retrospect though, yeah, Kubernetes is definitely gonna stick now. So should we move on to the next items on the agenda?
Yeah,
And
let's
I'm
do
the
it. We
one.
have a lot of time.
I'm the one starting. So I'm working on the minimal onboarding flow for Switchboard. I recorded a video of a walkthrough of the initial concepts that I'm working on. And yeah, it's been a great way to gather information. Also during my conversations, there is some information that customers have to input during the setup process that they can never change again, or if they lose, they can't access GitLab, or we can't help them. Either way, is there a way that we communicate this type of info? And then yeah, I'd appreciate any insights or any, if you can point me to something. And then I'm also using that to have conversations with engineers to help me with the scorecard that I'm working on to understand some of the stuff that they do.
Ali, I have one question. So how would you work on the scorecard? Because I don't think there's existing workflow around Switchboard. Like how would you handle that and how would you approach to work on the scorecard? I'm just curious.
So today there's something very minimal. There's just the Switchboard platform, and then SRE's kind of paste JSON file in there and kick off a bunch of jobs.
And validating,
Yeah. So it's around that, but then also trying to understand some of the stuff they do outside Switchboard. And because we're also building for them, we would like them to do most of the stuff they do outside Switchboard, inside Switchboard. So it's kind of a hybrid of mapping / scorecard, because yeah,
got it.
it's like a bit yeah, it's going to inform the next phase.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
I have just a question about when you asked if we have an approach for telling the user about information they can never change again. Is this something that, are they selecting like, or what they're configuring it in a way and then they can never reconfigure it after?
Yeah, so they're bringing encryption keys to encrypt their GitLab instance. And so we're giving them the option of bringing their own keys. I think once they've put them, we can't see them, and if they lose them, we can't help them either.
Oh, I see. This sort of reminds me of, well, actually, no, it doesn't. I was going to say we deal with tokens that are only displayed for a certain amount of time in the UI for a runner. And we just tell them like, this is going to be displayed only for a short period of time. So we give them the chance to copy it so that they don't lose it.
Mhm.
But then if they lose it, like it's on them. So that's how
Mhm,
we
mhm.
tell them right now. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, I don't know if it's something. I think I'll lean a lot on the writers to kind of help me communicate that. I guess since there isn't kind of an approach that
I'll link the
comes to
issue
mind.
too.
Sure, awesome.
Okay,
Yeah,
I think
that's it from me.
all right. Mine, the first one's just read only, and then I'm starting to validate runner fleet dashboard. You might have seen I shared it in our UX co-working channel, and I'll just share the issue that I'm doing this through because we have a very hard time finding enterprise customers to meet with, and there's this process in the handbook that you can lean on customer success managers for that. So yeah, if you want to take a look at that issue, if that applies to you in the future, it might be helpful.
Gina, have you reached out to any like technical account managers? I think sometimes they're very like reactive to our requests.
Yes. Okay. So they're now called customer success managers, which took me a
Oh,
little bit
okay.
to remember.
Sorry. So that's a new
No,
name.
that's okay. No, that's who I was saying to lean on.
Okay.
Because
Thanks.
yeah, they've helped me in the past just like meet with customers just to hear what their pain points are.
Yep.
And yeah, so we have an ongoing list that Darren and I are keeping.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
So many changes.
Yeah. That's it for me, Emily. You want to go?
Cool. So I just had one open question about larger designs that are put in through a lot of small MRs that are kept behind a feature flag. I was getting this question from some of the engineers as if they get a UX review for each small MR or a large review at the end, mostly being they were doing small reviews per small MRs, but we were getting people wondering why the experience wasn't complete. Like you couldn't go through everything because it was just one piece of the MR, and then the rest seemed broken. So I was just wanting to get other people's opinions on this.
Yeah, this was so relevant to the token like re-architecture that Runner was doing. And our devs did UX reviews for each small MR. And then sometimes our front end dev will include a table in the description being like, this is where you are, and these are the other MRs that are adding these other features. Or they'll just add like some description text to tell people when they're bringing up the changes. And then I linked an example there. Sometimes they'll also just ask me to review the MR before they ask like the random UX assigned reviewer. It's been like a mix. Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I think the problem was we're not like clear enough where it is in the experience because the issue it links to the entire feature, not just the little portion. So I guess just being a lot more clear about what the MR is changing and what is out of scope for that particular MR.
Yes, exactly. We did the exact same thing and linked to the entire feature that MR was not creating. So I think just like that text that he had added was helpful.
Cool. Good to go. Did you want to voice?
Yeah, it was very simple to what Gina said. So this I experienced when we started to work on the CI job token. I'm trying to find the MR, but like that proposal, it had to be broken down to like a few parts, like some preparation by the front end, some preparation by the back end, and then eventually they would like club all of that to form the final to work on the final development and implementation. So for that, the process we followed was engineers used to invite me first to do a UX review. And to make things easier for them, like once I reviewed, I left a very detailed sort of summary for the next designer who will be assigned by the reviewer to look at. So I explained to them that this is the bigger proposal. This MR only takes care of like this small part of that solution, and eventually this will lead to something else. So yeah, that's how we did it.
No, thanks for sharing. That'll help us a lot with, there's 2 big initiatives going on my team right now, and I think we'll have to do this for both of them, so.
Okay.
And yeah, my final thing is I'm finalizing the group level environment solution validation study this week. So hopefully this will make some progress after being paused during kind of like the team switch time. I'll pass it to Ritika.
Thanks. I just have this small update, like besides all the stage group work that I anyway keep sharing in co-working and other channels, that in preparation for the UX theme workshop that I thought I would be conducting next month, I figured that we don't have a vision documented for pipeline security yet. So like the very first step for me to prepare for the workshop was to meet with Jocelyn and write down our vision. And do that keeping in mind the information that we have at hand, like all the insights from Erika's researches, the existing epics that we have, the highly voted issues that we have, the market insight, the jobs to be done. So I created sort of this homegrown template to have that conversation, that discussion, so that eventually like we make sure that whatever vision we arrive at, it is done like after being informed of everything that else that we have in front of us. So the first mural is where we started from. I just made a copy when I created that. So that was the very first state. I brought together all the information that we had on different areas and created 2 sections. One was for each category. The plan was that we will create clusters, like we'll be bringing together item that could form one theme, and we ended up with 4 groups of information or of like the work that you want to do, and then we just voted on them. One of the options that we had was to maybe take it forward and instead do a like come up with the RICE score, but we refrain from doing that since we are going to be doing the UX theme workshop anyway, like in future. So we just kept this very simple. And once we identified the larger themes, the next step we took was put them, like use this business model innovation framework to bring together, like who are we creating the solution for, how we are planning to do that, and to achieve that, what is it that we would be working on in terms of features, in terms of changes. Then why do we think, like why are we confident that these set of features are going to like solve the problem? And the good part with this innovation framework is like if you make slightest of change in one part of this diagram, you will have to like make adjustments all throughout. So it's always balanced. It's never imbalanced. And it worked out pretty well for us. We came up with our new vision, which is we enable organizations to adopt good practices for secure handling of sensitive information. And I just thought, like, since it worked so well, maybe I'll just document this and share with the team. I haven't done that yet, though. Yeah, that's all.
So for the pipeline offering, we are focusing on the solution validation for the placement, like where we place this catalog feature. Is it the left side navigation, or is it more embedded version on the pipeline editor? And there were another option in the navigation, but inside the Explore tab, which is the same level with the organization, the new tab, but it's slightly behind this, so it's the second step. So we just try to work on another round of research. So thanks, Erika, to jumping in. So we just started this conversation. How can we proceed with the new test? And then once we got the result, probably we can more confidently say, okay, so we should play this feature to where. So I'm also working on that. I will work on that also the rest of the week. And there's another very critical discussions, which is mostly about like how we create architecture for the backend, which will eventually impact the UX work. So here is the MR. Like, I just don't want to dive into the two details, but it's more like if we design API this way, then there's some impact to the user flow. And then if we design API in the B way, then it also changes the user behavior. So I'm really glad that I'm participating in this discussion and just trying to follow up what they're saying. And then if we make this decision, then our MVC scope might be slightly changed in terms of technical perspective, but not a lot from the UX perspective. So this is still ongoing. Just wanted to share with you all. And yeah, that was my agenda. Do you have any questions, feedback? No, then I'll pass it over to Erika. Sorry, do you want to verbalize your comment?
Yes. Yeah. So I think that this has been like really good work, and we're trying to figure out like the way to approach this solution validation. But what we're going to end up doing is having an approach that other teams can use. And basically like what we've arrived at is having two groups, one that has the side nav in a prototype, one that doesn't have the side nav in a prototype, same tasks, different entry points, performance comparison, maybe a satisfaction question in there. And I think that's what we're going to need to make an argument for the side nav. So just wanted to like say that this was a hard problem and to give props, to say good job being patient and getting through it. And then I think like we're going to have a model so that next time it won't require so much thinking, as much thinking to get to how we approach it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Erika, because it wasn't easy. But the good thing is like for the first round of validation, we could eliminate like at least one option, and now we have two. So that's good. And then I think since it's a new process, like there are some challenges. It's just not our team. There are some other team also going through a similar process at the moment. And then I think once we design nicely and then come up with the result, I think probably we can also add it to our handbook and then provide better guidance on how to test these things around the placement.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, Erika, and like, wouldn't it always be the case that whenever we present to users a navigation option that's placed at a higher level, it will always end up getting a better score?
Yeah. And exactly. I've been calling it the bagel problem, where I'm like, we could ask them to search for bagels in the product. And if we had bagels on the side nav, they would always just go to the side nav. So yeah. So that's why I think having the two groups there, where one, they just don't even have that option. So it's not like bagels on the side nav. Then we can see if they can still perform or not. And that's why it's that's why it's two different groups.
Yeah, I'm just eager to see like if you figure out that, let's say, without bagels being on the front shelf, if they still happen to find it, how do you still justify to the team that, you know, they were still able to find it,
Yeah,
even though you
no.
think they found it much easier on the higher level? So
That's why I think it's like, if performance is the same with those two groups, we don't have evidence to add it to this.
Okay.
It's only that if they are failing without that side nav option, then we can say, hey, it's important.
Okay. Got it.
And we don't know, like with the other approach, I was like, it's bagels, like they'll just go to the where it says bagels. But so with this approach, we don't feel like we have a sense of which one will work. And then that's when we should be doing research. So we don't,
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
good question.
Yeah, I just had a question about how has the rest of your team been responding to performing this research, and if there's been any learnings that you could share with us if we have to run into the same situation.
So first of all, I think they're excited that we're validating this, because if the input is coming from the user, then like we could really be more confident to say like we're placing this menu at this place because of this outcome. So I think they like that from that perspective. But on the other hand, like I think they are still having this MR behind the feature flag, and I'm not so sure I don't think they have merged it. So of course there are also some frustration because they are ready to make this change happen, but at this point they need to just wait for the results. So that was the reason why the timeline and time frame was a little bit tight, because it's work in progress. So there are kind of like mixed feeling, but in the end, like they understood, like of course, like if we have more strong like evidence, that's good. And then I just try to like illustrate, okay, what's happening in this verse, so that they know what's going on for this research, so that they could be more patient.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
No worries. So if you don't have any other comments, then I'll pass it over to Will.
Thanks, Sanjay. So just a couple quick updates. I was on a customer call that Emily led a couple hours ago to learn more about users' impressions of the group level environments view concept that's going to feed into her solution validation study. Emily, I thought you did a good job handling, multiple users or customers on the call, and like trying to pivot to get to the questions that you really wanted to know, given some of the time constraints that we had on the call. So good job there. I'm also working with Ali and Pedro to brainstorm jobs to be done for Switchboard. So we've started that in an issue, and now we're moving over to a Google Doc to put that in there. I've also drafted an issue based on an initial team call that we had with Switchboard, that group. As I was writing it up after the meeting, I was a little bit confused about the request. So I'm going to need some context on how this, fits into the foundational research plan that Hayana has drafted. So I've tagged you and Hayana for some additional feedback. Erika, I see your writing. Did you want to elaborate?
Well, maybe see if the team wants to respond first. Anyone?
So I think we'll just need to see how this fits into what we're doing now, and make a call. Because yeah, we're trying to find out what the customer wants, but then also, some of our users are also the internal folks. So I kind of feel like we're trying to do the same thing, and maybe might not be necessary to have two issues to do that.
Yeah.
But that's just my feeling. Maybe we can get some feedback from Hayana as well.
Yeah, and that's why I want to clarify that before like jumping in, because if this is like duplicate or redundant, like let's not, do that in that case.
So my first note is just that I wanted you to know that there's this foundational research happening like in the back burner, but we've run some participants on the life cycle of an image and understanding how those are environments and how that relates, and kind of whether or not people want one pipeline for them or how they kind of structure that. So that's happening, and I'll just catching up on life, but I will link the dovetail, and it might be helpful for you to watch some of those videos. That's my first point. But then looking at the foundational research, like I think we have a bunch of this just from the secrets and security related research.
Okay.
And I think I'll take a note to look through all of that. But one thing I can just quickly make note of is with the personas. We know that there's this like shift left with security. So even developers that was like a big thing that we keep finding, is even developers are getting their hands on security and compliance stuff. And we did in the secrets features prioritization survey, I'll bring up the finding, but we asked them if they knew what compliance requirements they were working under. And surprisingly, they had a sense of it, even the developers. But let me pull up that report. But I can dig in here and help you piece together what we know.
Okay.
Because it might feel like this is coming from nowhere, but it's actually, I didn't really even realize this was a nice summary. People to be like, oh, we know some stuff about this. So good job in framing the issue there, everyone. But I can be helpful. So let's figure out the best way for me to help you guys. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Cool. And then the last point, I'm working with Erika. She may speak to it a little bit below, but I'm helping her pull some like customer emails later in the week from our past sus analysis, so that I think she and her team can do some like future like follow-up calls. So I think that's it for me.
Yeah, and since we have time, I can actually just share my screen and show you the benchmark report. There. Okay, so this is a slide summary of the performance, and I set up a benchmark findings epic that has like videos of overall, like, so this is all detailed, and in a way, like we issuetize this report. But basically there, we're doing good, but with each of our workflows that we tested, back to me mouse, there's like one sort of really painful task in each of the workflows that we need to address. So it's use the include syntax, identifying the failure, the reason for a failure, and understand and adjust unit tests. And then the first of the find and fix pipeline error workflows. So this table here kind of gives you a sense for each of those workflows. This column gives you two to three word summary of each of them. So for the author of pipeline workflow, we found a barrier to entry with the include syntax, which is important because that's the entry point for our CI components catalog. And as a companion analysis, I looked at all the sus verbatim for verify for the last 6 quarters and did an alignment exercise to see how much the pain points for each of the tasks and then each of those UX themes in that table below mapped to the sus verbatim. And it was kind of astounding. So 13%, which we're calling a significant amount of those negative sus verbatims, were related to this author of pipeline workflow. And then looking down here at these UX themes, one of the themes across all the tasks was just general confusion about YAML. And that was 8% of the negative sus verbatims. So we really want to focus here on making that whole YAML related workflow easier. And then it occurred to me that we now actually have all of these people who gave us these responses about the YAML experience. So we can actually, that's great because they're hard to recruit, right? It's hard for us to find good matches. So here we have this lovely sample of 43 participants who gave us feedback on the YAML experience. There's like all these different categories where they made points, but basically it bubbles up to having a hard time with the YAML experience. So Will is, thank you, Will, is going to give us the email contacts for those. And what we can do, because we can't really have, although people would probably try, we can't really schedule 43 calls, but what we can do is run them through that CI Alpha Components program and those assignments. And then we'll get a nice read on the satisfaction scores and how those are increasing. Right now, we have like a dedicated, really well-rounded sample where we can do deep dive interviews. But actually, they're pretty satisfied with the current template experience when we ask them. So it means that it's harder for us to raise that bar in terms of their feedback and getting them into a really satisfied place. So these folks who gave us the sus feedback and were negative, we should get a good read on if we can move them up to positive, then we're really doing a good job. So that was what Will was talking about. And that's the author of pipeline workflow. And then understand and adjust unit tests. 2 words for that is his hidden treasure. So it was amazing. So one of the things we did at the end was we gave them this job to be done rating question, where we had them agree or disagree on a scale of 1 to 7, where anyway, so we had them look at their agreement. And they gave us really high scores here. And they were delighted. They were delighted. Once they didn't understand what was quite happening with the unit tests at first. So it wasn't discoverable for them because they went into the logs and they weren't looking at the UI. And they did this like circular thing where they were like, oh, I've arrived at this artifact. Don't know what that means. And then they would like arrive at the artifact in a different way and a different way. And then like then we kind of like pointed out, hey, the artifact is going to be helpful for this task. And then they were like, what is this artifact? How does it relate to this error? But once we did the reveal, they were like thanking us at the end of the session. Like they were like, and so this rating here, this 6.1 is very high because they were just so pleased about it. So, I think that there are some small, I mean, I'm not the designer, but if we can make it more discoverable and a little bit more obvious to them how those things are related. Like an example is, so in the unit test, it showed them a screenshot of what the website would look like if it displayed as per the code. And they weren't sure if it was what the website should look like or it does look like. So we just need to like connect those dots for them. And then they will make them so happy. And here we saw only 3% alignment with the sus verbatim, but that actually like tracks with this hidden treasure idea, right? Where they're not quite that's not discoverable for them. And then for the find and fix pipeline errors, 9%, they're waiting too long. Another way to tell the story there, though, is that they learned, which is really cool. So if you look at this, so we had find and fix pipeline errors in build, and then one in test and one in deploy. And so you can see here that they kind of bombed that first one. But then on the next one, they were in green again. And basically what it was is if they could step back and look at the patterns in the YAML file, they could use that to quickly come up with the solution, as opposed to like digging into the logs. So if we can figure out how to help them take that step back, maybe it's AI, I don't know, but to like look at the discrepancies in the different stages of the YAML file, we could really help them succeed there. But here you can see that this jobs to be done rating is not as high. And that's because they dinged us because they get really frustrated waiting for the entire pipeline to run after every fix. So that's a theme that came out here. And it's actually, that specific theme is small in terms of the percentage of sus verbatim. I think that's because we logically have a smaller percentage of enterprise respondents, and that's a particular enterprise problem that we were getting feedback on. So another thing that Will and I are working on is to track business size in the sus responses now. And so I think that will be helpful. But yeah, so this frustration with running the entire pipeline for every fix, I've heard that before, but it was really resounding, and we see them bringing down our satisfaction scores or agreement with the job to be done ability. And that's because the user behavior in terms of fixing a pipeline is just to like throw a fix at it and see if that worked, and throw a fix at it and see if that worked. They're not like, now would this work? Let me check on the documentation. Like, they're not doing that kind of thinking. And so then it becomes really frustrating. They're like, I just wanted to try that thing, and now I have to sit here and wait for however many minutes. And I asked, so I did my like due diligence follow-ups, like, tell me about your workflow, and like, is this really a big thing? And they're like, yes, this gets me out of my flow, it gets me out of context. I'll go watch a YouTube video and then I'm totally distracted and not useful. Yes, so that's the benchmark stuff in a quick summary. And then let's go to comments and I'll stop sharing.
I had a question about how you determined if the sus feedback percentage was significant, considerable, or small.
Yep.
If there's documentation also that's already out there, I can just look at that.
No, it's totally good. No, I love that question. So I put that in the report, and it's just mapping percentages.
Okay.
It's just because later on, if it just has 3% or not, like I put the percentages in that report, right? Like 9%. Just that later on, and like Jackie's question was like, is that good? It's like, oh. So we wanted to be able to characterize it in those ways. And so just being transparent about how we're doing that. But I think it's legitimate because if we look at like kind of the other findings, 33% of them were not categorizable, right? So like something about inconsistent behavior in CI/CD pipelines, like, I don't know how you map that to much. But so, and you might think like, that's a lot, should we be concerned? But actually, like, it's pretty, to me, it legitimizes it because it means that there's a bucket of things you can't force fit into these benchmark pain points and themes. And so like having a third of it be a round number is good. But yeah, to answer your point, we just came up with these kind of categories as just a way of labeling it.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, but they're mutually exclusive, so it has to fit into one of the categories and only one of the categories. And to do that, I ended up having to parse out a lot of the verbatims because they'll talk about all these things. And so to get the 1-to-1 scoring, and I think it was 317 verbatims that we had.
Wow. Okay.
And Erika, when you pull those sus verbatims that I'm gonna, find emails for later, did you only focus on people who indicated they were open to a follow-up conversation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
And
just wanted to make sure.
I wasn't at first, and then I was like, oh, what's this column? Oh, that's important. But so I did. I got it.
Cool.
Yeah, and then I just pulled out just to try to make it easier so it's not lost in the issue verse. Here are these 4 pipeline authoring design related tasks that we have at a critical severity level. So those are the ones that are critical. So like a way of like prioritizing all of them. Those would be the most important. And then, yeah, the one that I pulled out, I can lead is bringing those people into the CI Alpha program.
Erika, I just wanted to say really that this was really great work. Maybe because it related to things that I was working on, so I was like more interested in it. But yeah, this was awesome. And I love that we're seeing feedback across like the whole pipeline experience. It's not just one section.
Yeah,
Very exciting.
especially when it touches upon the places that we have always like talked about. And there's never been like enough evidence that we should really focus on that work and improve those experiences. So I'm very hopeful that the results of this benchmarking would like help us prioritize things which are really going to make big changes for good.
Yeah, that sus analysis was pretty amazing. Like I didn't expect to see that much overlap. And some people kind of just did like a 1 sentence, like we found this also in the sus, but I'm just extra. So I was like, I need to know the precise percentage of sus verbatims that are mapping to each of these things. But in a way it's good because then we can make this statement that 45% of the negative sus verbatim overlapped with those, like as an aggregate is 45% of them, which is more than the 33% of the NAs. So I think it's good stuff. Thanks guys. Oh yeah, and then later this week I'll work on the Q2 research prioritization, and so we'll start pinging in that to start getting threads on what we should be prioritizing. And then the last but not least is is it linking? Yeah, I put a deck together after kind of now having this idea that we are focusing on environments. I was like, oh, I can think of a key problem that I've heard. So like across these 4 studies, we keep hearing this problem related to coordinating variables across environments. So I just pulled out slides from each of those reports. Because I would say that that's a big problem. Like we're not even asking about that. It just keeps coming up. So I linked that deck. I'm glad to be back. I missed everyone. I was just only working on that 1 study. So.
Thank you for sharing all of that too. Very excited. All right. Does anybody have anything else? No. All right. Well, have a good rest of your weeks. Talk to you later.
See you all.
Bye, everybody.